So let's talk about how to maximize your health with nutrition. So let's begin with the final word. So I'll talk about some traditional diets from around the world. So traditional Japanese diets tend to have little fat, but the Japanese suffer less cancer than the North Americans, Aussies, and British. The traditional Mexican diet, on the other hand, has very high fat intake, but they still suffer less cancer than the North Americans, Aussies, and British. The African countries have low consumption of red wine, but have less cancer. In contrast, the Italians have more red wine, but still suffer less cancer than the North Americans, Aussies, and British. And finally, the traditional German diet tends to consume large amounts of beer, lots of fat and sausages, but still suffer less cancer than the North Americans, Aussies, and British. So what can we conclude from all of this? Right. Eat and drink what you like. Speaking English is apparently what kills you. So, yes. It's funny because it's not that far from reality, right? You get up in the morning, you check the internet, and oh my goodness, coffee's bad for you. And then the paper comes and you open up, there's another article, oh, coffee's good for you today, right? It's this constant flip-flop. And so this joke is really not that far off the mark, which is why I like to include it. So as I mentioned in the introduction, I am a registered dietitian. And I'm an author. There's my book. And the medical advisor on my book was my own oncologist, okay, who's here at Odette. And as well as a cancer survivor. And I also developed programs for Wellspring. The Wellspring house is actually on the Sunnybrook campus here. And the reason I got involved with it is they did a renovation and they put in a demonstration kitchen, and they needed someone to develop the nutrition content. So, to research how nutrition interacts with cancer, and also to choose the recipes and what can we teach to people. And it's really amazing program, so I encourage you to go. But also it was kind of the starting point to developing my own program, because it really is great being over there talking to cancer patients and survivors and cooking for them. And, the only downside it makes me think about is, what if you don't live close to a center, or even if you're across the street, you don't feel like getting dressed up and going out, or, paying the crazy parking prices, right? So I wanted to have a program that's accessible to everyone. So my program is on the internet, and if you've got internet connection at home, you can access it, and I'll tell you more about it at the end. But that's where I'm going with the work that I do. And I also want to open with this quote. I've always thought the actions of men the best interpreters of their thoughts. And by men, of course, this person means people. And why I want to include that is your action of showing up here today on a beautiful, sunny June morning and putting aside the other things that you had to do really tells me that this is on your mind. And I want to assure you that I hear that, and I'm going to make sure that I give you some really good take-home information that you can get started with today. And I want to thank the Patient Education Department at Odette. And I want to let you know that you may not realize that if you had your cancer treatment at another center, the amount of patient education that's available is much less. So I want you to really appreciate that this day that they put on for you is not just something that you get at any cancer center. So Odette, I think, is really at the forefront of providing patient education. So, and I just want to acknowledge them for considering me as a trusted advisor, as well as the Melanoma Network of Canada. Yes. So thank them for putting on this day, as well as for inviting me. So here's the agenda, and this is when Jason and the people in the patient education department got in touch with me, this is what they said they wanted me to speak about. First of all, talking about fad diets and demystifying fad diets. And then the second topic of eating well when you have cancer. And then I added to that, I want you to also know where to get this information, because you know that parable that you give a man fish and he can eat for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, he can eat for a lifetime, right? So I don't want to just give you the information that's current and that's actionable today, because we could all leave here and there could be a new study that gets published tomorrow and comes out, and it's new information that you need to know. So I want you to know where to get that. And there's some books that I'm going to recommend and different resources, as well as my own program I'll tell you about. So let's start with demystifying fad diets. And I'll tell you that I actually have a whole 1-hour session just on fad diets. So I've condensed the information for you. So let's say, is everyone on Amazon? Go to Amazon, buy your books. So if you go to Amazon.com and you type in cancer diet in the search engine, there are 9,143 hits you're going to get, okay? That's one of those, right? Okay, so I'm going to help to categorize some of these for you. So let's start with juicing. That's pretty popular right now. And so you've got juicing for prostate health, juicing for health, and then you even get some titles that will use the word cure. So this is a cancer cure through juicing. This is, again, they use the word cure, phytochemical smoothies to cure every disease. Here's the Ultimate Juicing Bible, new juicing recipes. This title I love, 45 Days of Hell. Sounds like someone is just very honest about their experience with this juicing. And here, a little more general, just juicing for overall health. Then we've got the raw food diet. And the raw food diet also tends to also talk about this word, detoxing and raw food. So raw food for beginners, raw food detox. We see that food, that again. So very popular as well. The alkaline diet. So here calling it the pH miracle. Here's again the word cure in the book title, the alkaline cure, the acid alkaline diet, which it's sometimes referred to as. And this one is just understanding pH and the link to cancer. Macrobiotic is another big movement. This one tends to, you see more the title prevention here, the macrobiotic approach to cancer. This is a book about a woman who recovered from cancer by using macrobiotics, so she's written her story. So the macrobiotic approach or macrobiotic prevention. And then really on quite an extreme on its own is the Gerson therapy, which is a really intensive regimen, a really committed program based on Max Gerson's work. And there's a movie, and so there's a lot, no underestimation there, 9,000 hits on Amazon on the cancer diet. So how do you sort all this out? So let me just, and keep in mind when I showed you all those titles, some of them are talking about cures and miracles and their connection to cancer. Let me just say though that they're not all telling you the same thing, and though they're claiming to be the answer, I want to just share with you sort of where they contradict each other, okay? So the macrobiotic diet is mostly based on cooked grains, whereas the raw food diet will tell you you're not allowed any cooked grains, you can only have sprouted grains. And the alkaline diet says no beans or grains. The macrobiotic says no nightshade vegetables, and nightshades are a certain group of plants like eggplant, tomato, potato, but the Gerson has you eating lots of potato. Macrobiotic says no juice, but the juicing program and Gerson say lots of juice. But then they differ on how you get the juice, because juicing says, well, you can use a centrifugal juicer, that's okay. But Gerson says, no, you only need the $2,500 hydraulic juicer press, right? And then the macrobiotic says you can have garlic, ginger, and vinegar only occasionally, whereas the alkaline diet says you can have it daily, regularly, right? So, I don't think there's, one cancer diet for everyone, and this kind of proves it, but also I think the best take-home message I can give you about all these fad diets and kind of demystifying is not where they contradict each other, but where do they intersect. Because you can read testimonials, and if you believe them, some people have cured their cancer, reversed their cancer with these. So what do they have in common? So they focus on healing through good nutrition, which I can certainly get behind. The emphasis is on plant foods, and they all limit processed foods, sugar, animal products, alcohol, and caffeine. Okay, so if you... Okay, well, 2 out of 3 is not bad, right? So if you wanted a take-home message on, the different fad diets, and I certainly resonate. We sort of heard contradictory information in the beginning, with the panel. One saying, get the information. Information is power. Get on the internet, and then say, like, you got to take a break, right? Like the internet. Stop looking at the internet. And we all have our own threshold with that. Like, you want to get that information, but then we're going to hit this wall where at a certain point it's just like getting so frustrating and just like getting too ridiculous, right? And so if you're at that point, just remember these 3 areas in which all these fad diets will agree, okay? And I think if you hit these 3 major points, that's going to help you demystify all of those fad diets. So I hope that satisfies that, but I'll certainly take questions. If you have questions about specific fad diets, I can take that at the end. Now I want to go on to the next topic that the organizers asked me to speak about, which was eating well when you have cancer. Now, and I even tried to tease out more, like, what exactly are you after here? Because really, I feel like this can go in 2 different directions. So eating well when you have cancer. This is what it means to me as a dietitian. And so on the purple side of this chart, I would think of this as more the defensive side, so eating defensively, right? And so this would be nutrition for treatment management. So we've heard about the treatment, surgery, chemotherapy. I could add another box there called targeted therapy and immunotherapy. And we've also heard that they have side effects. Now, I'm going to focus on this side first, but this is what eating well when you have cancer could mean, right? Because if you're in the midst of your treatment and you want to really get the full benefit of the treatment and help yourself to tolerate this treatment and stay on it longer, nutrition can help you do that. And then on the light blue side of this chart is, I think, where what we tend to think of as the cancer diet is nutrition to reduce your risk of cancer, right? And I'll tell you the 2 directions I'll take that in is looking at foods that are actually shown to help boost the immune system and foods that can help attack the cancer cell. So let's start with the purple side of this chart first. So here are some of the side effects or concurrent conditions. Now, this is not specific to melanoma, but all cancers and their treatments can have these side effects: anemia, appetite loss, constipation, depression, diabetes, diarrhea, dry mouth. I shouldn't read off the list, it's too depressing. But I'll say for everything on that list, there is a nutrition strategy that's going to help minimize that. Now, sometimes nutrition is a major part of this side effect, and sometimes it's a small thing that can also help, okay? And where to get more information on this is right upstairs, okay? And if you haven't visited the Pearl, you should check that out, and they have information and brochures you can look at there to help you manage your side effects. As well, if you've never noticed, if this sign here, and hopefully now next time you're in the clinic you'll notice, it says Patient and Family Nutrition Resource Center, okay? And if you go down that hallway, that's where the dietitians have their offices. So this is Rosie, she's the diet technician, and this is where she hangs out. Do you know this place across from Druxy's on the TG level? There it is, TG 261. And you can stop in there if you have questions about any of those side effects that you're experiencing with your treatment and how nutrition can help you. As well, these are the 4 dietitians, and so Tracy, Elaine, Edith, and Pauline, and I highlighted Elaine and Edith's names because they're the 2 that work in melanoma, okay? So you can also make appointments with them to specifically sit down and talk about what nutrition issues you're having, and they can help you, okay? So I will not say anything more about this purple side here, except that consider that there is nutrition that can help with these side effects and help you to tolerate. But I'll take questions about that at the end if you have specific questions about that. So I want to focus now on this side of the chart, which is nutrition to reduce your risk. And we'll start with nutrition to attack the cancer cell. So what does the life cycle of a cancer cell look like? So it begins here with inflammation, or more accurately, you should probably say chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation creates an environment in which the cancer cell can actually come into existence, okay? It requires more rapid cell turnover, and then you just have a greater likelihood of a cell with a defect being born. And then instead of that cell going through its natural cell death, which all cells do, they have a certain lifespan and then they replace themselves and they die off. It doesn't die off and it survives. And then that cell proliferates, then it invades the tissue, and then it goes through angiogenesis, or creation of its own blood supply, and then metastases or spread. So this is the life cycle of a cancer cell, okay? And now we see this word in the middle, nutraceutical, okay? So let's talk about nutraceutical and what that is. Because what these lines here with this blunt end is showing you is that nutraceuticals can turn this off, okay? So a nutraceutical is a combination of two words, nutrition and pharmaceutical. So it's a food or part of a food that provides medical or health benefit. And the nutraceuticals target several steps in cancer cell development, and I'm going to give you 3 examples of that. Okay, garlic. Any garlic lovers here? All right. You'll be glad you showed up today, as opposed to the beer lover. He's really sad that he came. So, where in the life of a cancer cell does garlic interfere? So first of all, with inflammation. Garlic can reduce inflammation, which is pretty important because it's the whole starting process, right? It can reduce the invasion and the angiogenesis. Ginger, any ginger lovers? Okay, good. You'll be glad you came too. Ginger can reduce inflammation, cell survival, invasion, angiogenesis, and spread, okay? And the cruciferous family, otherwise known as the mustard family. So this is cabbage and cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, kale. Any lovers of the cruciferous vegetables in here? Okay, good. Well, if you didn't raise your hand, you will want to after you see this. So where can the cruciferous vegetables interfere with the life cycle of a cancer cell? It can reduce inflammation, cell survival, cell proliferation, invasion, angiogenesis, and metastases. That's why we hear so much about broccoli, right? And all of this from those foods. Now, what are other nutraceuticals? Berries, citrus, flax, green tea, dark chocolate, mushrooms, omega-3 and fish, soy, spices, tomatoes. These are all proven nutraceuticals that can interfere with cancer cell. Now, my question is, don't look at the fish, but for the rest of them, what do they have in common? What do you see there? Very good. They're all plants. So, another take-home message, eat your plants. Not these. These, okay? So you see over here, you might not recognize this little guy. This is turmeric. This is what it looks like when it's in the rhizome form. And you can tell it's related to ginger, right? It's in the same family. There's broccoli, apple, there's your green tea, avocado, tomato. This looks like wheat berries. There's your dark chocolate, pistachios, your cranberries. Okay? So, and if you want more information on this, this is an excellent book. Does anyone have this one? Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm happy to be introducing it to you today. And those are the authors. They're from the University of Quebec. So Foods That Fight Cancer specifically looks at their laboratory work that these two researchers do, looking at foods and how that can interfere with cancer. And then if you want to look at spices in particular, Dr. Agrawal in Houston publishes a lot of work on spices, and that's his book. Now, his book is not specific to cancer, but it's more sort of an A to Z sort of spice encyclopedia, let's call it. And you might want to check this out. I didn't have time in my presentation to show it to you, but if you go on YouTube and you type in curry to prevent cancer, you'll see this little news clip comes up, and you'll see the interview with Dr. Agarwal, the one who wrote that book. And he talks about turmeric, and he mentions melanoma specifically, okay, and the research that he's done specifically on turmeric and melanoma. Okay, so you should check that out. Now, here's my disclaimer slide on all these nutraceuticals, though, and that is where the research is coming from. So it's coming from laboratory data. So they, researchers work with a petri dish like this, and inside the dish is lung cancer cells or colon cancer cells or melanoma cells, and they introduce an extract of broccoli or cabbage or green tea into that petri dish, and because they have powerful microscopes, they can actually see that where in the life cycle of that cancer cell that nutraceutical is interfering, okay? And there's, on the other end of the spectrum then, from this very micro look at what's going on, we have the very big macro look where we see that in epidemiological studies where they follow tens of thousands or sometimes hundreds of thousands of people in the cohort, and they say, oh, the ones who are eating more fruits and vegetables, they have lower rates of heart disease and lower rates of cancer. That's another area that supports this work. And then a third one is just looking at, population studies. Well, where do they have low rates of cancer? Well, one place is India, for example. Well, if we look at charts that show the spice consumption in India compared to North America, it's crazy off the chart how much herb and spice they use in their diet. And I actually, because of that, I took this Indian cooking class, and the chef was very much about, the authentic Indian experience, right? And he'd add the spices, and it would be like, for one batch, like the spices would be about a third of a cup. Like, it's not just a little dash of something, right? Like, it's a major ingredient. And so I'd say to my partner at the prep table, I'd say, that's why people from India have such low rates of cancer. And then he'd add all the ghee and the salt and everything, and I'd say, that's why people from India have such high rates of heart disease. Right? So we take, and in North America, we can eat Indian food on Monday and Japanese food on Tuesday, and we have access to all this cuisine, right? So it's good to take advantages of all these foods that we have available here. So that's kind of the disclaimer, because I just want to be clear that we don't have these randomized clinical trials like in drug trials where they say, let's feed these people a lot of garlic and turmeric and see that, for 2 years that their cancer doesn't develop. So we don't have that. But, being a cancer survivor myself, I'm in the same position. I don't feel that, okay, what's the downside? Okay, I'm going to get garlic breath, but, is there like a major side effect that I'm going to get because I'm going ahead and including these spices and vegetables in my diet? And the answer, I think, is no on that. However, I'll just do a little caveat. If you start thinking that you're going to start taking these as a supplement, that's where you could get into problems, right? So what I'm advocating is for the culinary use of these things. Okay, so back to my chart here, and nutrition to reduce the risk. So we talked about the nutraceuticals that are going to attack the cancer cells, and now I want to talk about food and also lifestyle choices to boost the immune system. And we've just heard, in the area of melanoma, they went for so long with no new drugs, and then all of a sudden they've got targeted therapies and then immune therapies, right? And it really parallels the work that I'm seeing in nutrition, where in the medical field, they're looking at drugs to either remove the brakes on the immune system or to boost it. And in the work that I do, I'm looking at research that uses nutrition and lifestyle to boost the immune system. So we know the immune system is really key. So what is the immune system? In very simple terms, it's our cellular defense mechanism, right? It's the cells that are going to probably more accurately, not punch it out, but just gobble it up and eat it up, right? And we've probably heard this idea that we all have cancer cells in our body. Have you heard this? And that, but only some of us develop cancer and some don't. So why is that? So tumors develop when the immune surveillance breaks down or becomes overwhelmed. So think of immune surveillance like a security guard doing rounds through the building, right? These cells going around. And if that surveillance is broken down, then a little, couple of cancer cells can be there, and then, they're going to double their size, and they can, create a mass in fairly quickly, right? Or if the immune system becomes overwhelmed, that's also when, the cancer can really take off. And I'm going to elaborate on this, so remember this image. So I want to share with you today 2 goals that every cancer survivor should have to thrive after cancer. And when I say thrive after cancer, I mean not just being free of cancer, but also feeling, less fearful. And I know when I finished my cancer treatment, I was very afraid that my cancer was going to come back. And I had a lymphoma. So in my particular case, if I did have alcohol, the pain would shoot down my arm and into my hand. It'd be very, very painful. And after my treatment, I'm feeling better. I went out with some friends and I had a drink and I got this headache. And this is how paranoid I was. I called the oncology resident on call here and I said, oh my God, I just went out, and I had a drink and now I have this headache and I think I have brain mets. And it was actually a little humiliating because he really didn't acknowledge this great fear that I had, but also kind of, was a bit of a wake-up call. Like, I'm getting it, my fear and my anxiety is getting too much, right? Like, I'm so paranoid that it's coming back. So I also want to, when I talk about thriving after cancer, I mean having more confidence that you're doing the right thing, and less fear and less anxiety. That's also what I mean about, when I say that. So here's hint number 1. So both parts of our immune system are our first-line defense against cancer. When I say both parts, I mean, I didn't get into detail with this, but there's the innate and there's the acquired part of the immune system. So goal number 1 then is you want to keep that immune system strong. And sometimes I talk about this in terms of boosting the immune system or supporting the immune system. And I'll show you how to do that. Number 2 is chronic inflammation can promote cancer. So the second goal I want you to have is to reduce chronic inflammation, okay? And we'll talk about anti-inflammatories. And inflammation is actually part of the immune system, and it's, I like to think of it this way. It's like calling 911 in your body, okay? So the cellular responders are going to show up. If you saw an accident on your street and you called 911, the police are going to show up and the fire truck and the ambulance. And what's the ideal scenario here is that they take the patient away, the tow truck comes, takes the car. If there's a fire, they put it out. They get the traffic moving again and everything goes back to normal. That's acute inflammation. What if you called the 911 and then they didn't leave? What's going to happen then? Well, you're going to get all these looky-loos on the street going, what's going on? And people can't get down the street. The garbage truck can't get down. Everything's going to it's going to be problems. That is chronic inflammation. So it's a good functional system when it works and then everyone goes back to their normal job. But it's dysfunctional when they stay in the area, and that's what chronic inflammation is, okay? So it's a healthy part of the immune system in short doses, but when it stays, it starts to cause problems like heart disease and cancer. So we want to fight that chronic inflammation. Okay, so here are the 2 goals. Keep the immune system strong and reduce chronic inflammation. So how do we do that? Well, there are some immune boosting tools I'm going to tell you about and anti-inflammatory tools. But before I tell you, I just want to pause and really let this sink in, okay? There are things that you can do to support your immune system and reduce chronic inflammation. So I know that protecting your skin from sun exposure is important, but there are other things that you can do. And I think when I discovered this, it really helped to reduce my fear around cancer recurrence. So let's talk about these. We'll start with the immune boosting tools. So I'm going to go through each one of these, but before I do that, I just want to say where this information is coming from. So we can all get on Google and start looking around at immune boosting stuff, but I'm not sure that I would trust even half of what came up there. So there is a search engine. It's like Google for medical people and scientific people, and it's called Pubmed, Pubmed. If you go to Google, type in Pubmed, you'll find the search engine where I got this information from. So let's get started. So stress management. And I think the best way I can highlight this is by getting you to think about what was going on in your life predated your cancer diagnosis. Or, of course, we all know people who have cancer. Think about their situation. I'll just give you some scenarios, just throw these out there. So you get in a car accident, your dog dies, and you realize you have to put your mother into a nursing home. Or you lose your job and your kid flunks out of college. Or happily married for what you thought for many years, and then your partner's asking you for a divorce, right? A lot of times it's not uncommon that the diagnosis of cancer, the moment you notice these tumors or that you can see something, comes on the heels of some very stressful life events. And I know in the case of my cancer diagnosis, that was certainly true. So what's going on there? Remember I showed you that hexagon shape, and I said tumors develop when immune surveillance breaks down or the immune system becomes overwhelmed. Guess what can overwhelm the immune system? Stress, okay? So a strategy to support the immune system is ongoing stress management. And if you have regular stress management, be that a regular walking routine or a meditation practice or a yoga practice, when the life events happen, and they will, right? You have this regular thing that you're used to that is part of your life, and then you can go to it. If you don't practice stress relief on a regular basis and then you wait for the stressful event, it's not going to be, first of all, it's not going to occur to you. And so you need to have this regular practice, okay? And that can help to support your immune system. The next one is physical activity. Now, not all physical activity is immune boosting. Some of it is actually immune depleting, and I'll give you an example. After my cancer treatment, I was very out of shape. I had lost a lot of muscle, and I thought I got to get in shape. So it started with a half a lap at the track, but eventually I just kept going, and then I found myself in my first half marathon. So I had this idea, I'm going to finish this thing in under 2 hours, right? First one, never done one before. And I shot out of that starting gate like a bullet on fire, and just went, not like any of my training, not like this easy pace they teach you and all that stuff. I basically broke all the rules. I didn't hydrate enough. I was dehydrated, having chills or whatever. And next week, guess what? I was sick, right? So that sort of high intensity physical activity is very depleting on the immune system. So that's not what I'm talking about. Regular, moderate intensity physical activity is what is going to help support the immune system, okay? Next one is getting enough sleep. Sleep is very restorative for many systems in our body, including the immune system. Now, the research says that the ideal sleep is 7 to 9 hours a night. However, in case you're thinking you can stay out till 2 in the morning and then just get 8 hours, that's not ideal. Because the research actually shows that between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., that needs to be captured in that 7 to 9 hours as well. Okay, so the time you go to sleep is also important, not just the amount. Spending time in nature. Now, there's actually, all of this stuff that I'm telling you is based on the evidence, but there are not a lot of studies on this, but it was interesting. There's maybe 4 or 5 studies published, and it all comes from Japan. And in Japan, they call it forest bathing. Sounds nice, right? So in the first experiment, it was funny kind of reading the chronology of this research. So they load up some people on the bus and they take them out to the forest and they have a 3-day excursion in the forest, right? And it shows there certain type of cells called natural killer cells, okay, are increased. Well, then they thought, well, let's try 1 day. Let's try 1 day, or then they do that, or 1 hour, and yeah, it still helps. And then they're like, let's just sit at the edge of the forest. Let's not even go into it. Let's just look at the forest. And that was a benefit, all right? And what they discover is that it's the trees, okay? And the trees give off a natural wood aromatherapy, and when you breathe this in, it boosts your natural killer cells, okay? Next one is laughter. We've heard about laughter as the best medicine, right? Well, it turns out there's evidence to support this. And the evidence supports it based on whether it's genuine laughter. So in these studies, they, get people to watch a funny movie or read a funny story, and they measure their immune response to this. Or they have them do something like laughter yoga. Have you ever done laughter yoga? It's, so you actually, in the yoga class, like, okay, everyone, let's start with our big belly laugh, right? It's like, there's nothing funny about it. Like, you're not laughing at anything. You're just laughing for the sake of laughing. And then it kind of gets contagious, right? Because you hear yourself laugh and you hear the other people laugh, and it kind of starts to take on a life of its own. But even that will boost the immune system. So you don't even have to be laughing at something funny, okay? Just laughter in and of itself boosts the immune system. And the last immune boosting tool I'm going to tell you about today is weight loss. And a lot of this evidence comes from the fact that if you give a vaccine to someone who has a normal body weight and someone who's overweight, the person who's overweight has a less robust response to that vaccine. So the amount of antibodies that they're able to produce is less, okay? And the amount of immune cells is less. So we know that when they lose the weight, it can actually help support the immune system, okay? So these are some immune boosting tools for you. Next, I want to talk about the anti-inflammatory tools. So, when it comes to inflammation, there's a study published. The reference for it is in my book. If you want to look it up, I can get it for you. And it basically was a database, and it looked at ranking foods. So at one extreme, they had what food is the most anti-inflammatory, so what's going to reduce inflammation. And on the other extreme, what food is the most pro-inflammatory? So what is going to encourage inflammation? And when you registered, there was a handout from me. So you should, if you're trying to madly write everything down there, you can check the handout as well. So now I said foods, but actually they didn't look at foods. They looked at macronutrients, which is carb, protein, fat, micronutrients, which is vitamins and minerals, herbs and spices. And so that's what they're ranking, and other certain nutritional elements. So the number one anti-inflammatory food component was omega-3, okay? So that's why we hear so much about eating your salmon and sardines and anchovies and herring and mackerel. Those are the fishes that are high in omega-3, okay? Omega-3 is the number one anti-inflammatory. The second is turmeric, that yellow spice, okay? So it is used a lot if you use yellow curry, so it would be in yellow curry. And there's just a couple of caveats need to know about using turmeric. So first of all, it needs to be first in an oil emulsion, okay? And that means, so if you're making a stew or something like that, and you've got the oil in the pot, and you add the garlic, right, and the onion, then you add the turmeric powder at that point, and you make the oil emulsion then. So you don't wait until you've added the broth and the other ingredients to add the spice, okay? And interesting enough, when I did this Indian cooking course, that's how they do it. So that's the traditional way to use it as well. The second thing to know about using turmeric for best advantage is that it should be combined with black pepper. And when you get a yellow curry blend, you will generally get both of those together. The reason for that is there's an active ingredient in black pepper called pepperine, and it helps your body absorb the active ingredient in turmeric, which is called curcumin, okay? So an oil emulsion plus combined with black pepper. The next one is tea. And we hear a lot about tea when we talk about nutraceuticals, right? And specifically there, they look at green tea because it's high in a nutraceutical called EGCG. But when you look at what's the anti-inflammatory potential, green and black are similar, okay? Fiber. Now, fiber there, it's one word, but basically it's all your whole grains, your beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas. It's your vegetables, your fruit, nuts, seeds, spices, right? It's all of those great foods from the plant world, okay? And then lastly, garlic. So we're talking about it twice here because it's the 5th ranking anti-inflammatory, and earlier because it's a strong nutraceutical. So there's some overlap with that. So those are the top 5, but also it matters how much you eat. And yes, it is possible to get too much of a good thing, meaning even if you have a very healthy diet, if you're consuming too much, then that's not good either. How much you weigh. Now I'm mentioning weight for the second time. The first time I talked about it is in relation to the immune cells and the immune response that your body can mount. I'm talking about it now because it's if you lose weight, it's going to help reduce inflammation because there are different types of body fat. And there's a particular type called visceral fat in which the fat is packed between the abdominal organs. And this fat, it like becomes an organ of its own and it starts secreting inflammatory cytokines. It actually starts creating inflammation in your body, okay? And then again, how much you move. So we've heard about exercise again when we talked about boosting immune cells, but now we know it also helps reduce inflammation. So some other tools that you can use. So I really want you to hear this message. You could start right now. It's possible to boost your immune system with food and lifestyle changes and reduce chronic inflammation. Now, sometimes it's the little things you do, like having a healthy breakfast or going for a walk in the park. Sometimes it's the bigger things, like getting a handle on the stress in your life or getting your weight under control, right? It's kind of one of those things where you hear about it and you think, oh yeah, easier said than done, right? And some of those require a lifelong commitment and more support, and I'll tell you how you can get help there. So when your organizers asked me to talk about eating well when you have cancer, I hope you realize there's the defensive side, how to best manage the side effects of treatment by using nutrition as a complementary tool. And I spent more time over here looking at the nutraceuticals that can attack cancer cells, and also the food and lifestyle choices that can help boost the immune system and reduce chronic inflammation. Okay, so back to the agenda then. So I talked about the fad diets and eating well. I want to talk how you can get more information, tools, and support to help you strengthen your immune system. I've given you a couple of books already, but this is my program. I just want to take a couple minutes and introduce you to it. It's called Thriving After Cancer Coaching and Support Program. And here, these are what I see as the benefits to it. Help you to stay up to date on the latest information. And you know, like that joke I told you in the beginning, right? About, you know, speaking English is what kills you. And this can be very frustrating, which is, I think, a lot of, you know, why you heard this advice earlier this morning in the peer panel, like just get away from the internet, right? So what is this benefit going to do for you? It's going to help reduce your fear and your anxiety, increase your confidence, because ultimately you're going to know where the information is coming from and that it's actually published evidence. And you're also going to have a feeling that I know what I should be doing and I'm doing it. Even if you're not doing every single thing every day, you can think about, you know, I just had this good breakfast and I feel really good about doing that, okay? It's going to help you feel better, you know, especially in between those appointment times. And I remember the worst time for me was right before. I had never had a migraine headache in my life until preceding one of my 3-month follow-up appointments, when I was so stressed that they were going to tell me my cancer was back that I worried myself into a migraine. So some more benefits, having access to evidence-informed answers to my questions, right? We all want to get our questions answered. It's going to help reduce your confusion, your frustration, and your stress, right? You don't want to be the ball in the pinball machine, you know, constantly going back and forth when it comes to nutrition information. And finally, there's also in the community social support, accountability. That's a good one for, you know, just knowing that someone's going to say, oh, well, did you, you know, practice your meditation this week? Or did you, you know, go for your walk? Also friendship and understanding that comes from other people who've had cancer. And ultimately, this is going to help you achieve your goals and strengthen your immune system. I like this little cartoon. I love my computer because my friends live in it. And if you haven't experienced, you know, community in your cancer journey, then you can, I urge you to check out Wellspring, and then from a virtual community, this is another place. So that is my three components of the agenda.